evening, and welcome to the Thursday, July 16th, 2026 Board of Education Reorganizational Meeting. At this time, I'd like to ask all to rise for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, as we're starting our new Board of Education term, we currently do not have board officers. So I'm going to call for an election of a temporary chairperson until we do have officers appointed. So I'd like to nominate our superintendent, Gaurav Pasi. Do I have a second? Ms. Melkonian, all in favor? 5-0. So Dr. Pasi, you are now our chairperson for the meeting. If you could take a roll call and make a motion, please.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to ask our district clerk, Ms. Kruger, to please take a roll call.
Adam Smith, Julie Epstein, Sandra Alvarez,
Here.
Deborah Brooks,
Here.
Rachel Gilliar, Nanette Melkonian, Jessica
Here.
Melwani.
Here.
Thank you. May I have a motion to recess to executive session to discuss personnel? May I have a second? Sandra Alvarez, all in favor? Okay, we are recessed into executive session. We expect to be back at 7:30. Okay, welcome back. Welcome, oh, excuse me. Okay, welcome back. May I have a motion to reconvene in public session? Ms. Brooks, may I have a second? Mr. Smith, all in favor? Okay, we're reconvened in public session. May I ask the district clerk to please take a roll call?
Adam Smith. Julie Epstein. Sandra Alvarez.
Here.
Deborah Brooks.
Here.
Rachel Gilliard.
Here.
Nanette Melkonian.
Here.
Jessica Malwani.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, may I call for the appointment and swearing in of the district clerk? May I have a motion? Ms. Brooks, may I have a second? Ms. Alvarez, all in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Ms. Kruger?
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of District Clerk at Port Washington Union Free School District, Town of North Hempstead, Nassau County, Port Washington, New York, according to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
May I also have a motion for the appointment of the Deputy District Clerk, Mary Beth Nardone? Ms. Malwani, may I have a second? Ms. Brooks, all in favor? Thank you, it's unanimous. We will swear in Ms. Nardone at a future meeting. May I have a swearing in, may I now call for the election of the newly elected, swearing in of the newly elected trustees. May I ask the district clerk to administer the oath of office to Ms. Rachel Gilliard. Julie Epstein already took the oath of office because she was not available for tonight's meeting.
I do solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of New York, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of BOE member at Port Washington Union Free School District, Town of North Hempstead, Nassau County, Port Washington, New York, according to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations. Tonight we have a new ex officio student board member, and I'm going to ask Ms. Kruger to please swear her in.
I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of ex officio student representative at Port Washington Union Free School District, Town of North Hempstead, Nassau County, Port Washington, New York, according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Leah. Okay, I will now call for the election and swearing in of the board president. Does anyone have a nomination?
I'd like to nominate Adam Smith.
Is there a second? Ms. Brooks? Are there any other nominations? Okay, all those in favor of Adam Smith being the Board of Education president? Okay, it is unanimous. Congratulations, Mr. Smith. And Ms. Kruger, could you please swear him in?
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of New York, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of President of the Port Washington Union Free School Board, School District, Town of North Hempstead, Nassau County, Port Washington, New York, according to the best of my ability.
Dr. Posse. Thank you to the board. At this time, I'd like to ask the board for nominations for board vice president. Do we have any nominations? Ms. Melkonian?
I nominate Julie Epstein.
Do we have a second? Ms. Gilliar? Ms. Alvarez? She came up. Ms. Alvarez, with a second. All in favor? Oh, do we have any other nominations? I'm sorry. No. All in favor? 6-0. Congratulations to Ms. Epstein, and we'll ask the district clerk to swear her in when she returns. Great. Okay. Wrong agenda. Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask the district clerk to swear in the superintendent of schools.
Thank you. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Port Washington Union Free School District Superintendent at Port Washington Union Free School District, Town of North Hempstead, Nassau County, Port Washington, New York, according to the best of my ability.
Thank you very much. At this time, we'd like to appoint district treasurer. Be it resolved that Donna Viola be appointed district treasurer for the 26-27 school year. Do we have a second? Ms. Melkonian, all in favor? 6-0. Congratulations to Donna, who will also be sworn in at a later time. Lastly, I'd like to make a motion, be it resolved that Linda DeCurtis be appointed Deputy District Treasurer to act in absence of the Treasurer for the 26-27 school year. Do we have a second? Ms. Brooks, all in favor? 6-0. Congratulations as well to Linda DeCurtis, who will also be sworn in at a later time. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the reorganizational agenda. That's the July 16th, 2026 Board of Education reorg agenda. Do I have a second? Ms. Mawani, all in favor? 6-0. Okay. So for those of you who are watching and not familiar, this is our reorg meeting where we have a number of annual positions and contracts that need to be, mostly positions that have to be set for the entire school year, which are set annually at reorg. Number of rates, programs, etc. So those are all included in item 6, which is the organizational matters of the board. It's 6.1 through 6. I think we'll actually we'll do one motion through 6.56, and then we'll move on to the board committees. But once we finish this agenda, we will actually close the meeting and then immediately restart our business meeting, where you'll see the normal flow. So at this time, I'd like to ask the board for an approval of items 6.1 through 6. I believe I said 6.56. So motion to approve items 6.1 through 6.56. Do we have a second? Ms. Brooks? All in favor? 7-0. Okay. Sorry, 6-0. Ms. Melkonian, was this the time you wanted to say something, or is that later? Yeah, I didn't look which one it was under. Was it under this or later? Let me know. We'll come back to it. Just confirm. Yeah, please. And I'll move on, and then we'll come back on that. Okay. So at this time, we're going to move on to item 7, which is the appointment of the board standing committees. We have the Audit Committee, the Bogart Fund Scholarship Committee, the Budget and Facilities Committee, Curriculum Committee, and Policy and Personnel Committee, each of which having its Board of Education appointees appointed, and in the case of the Audit Committee, the public members as well. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion for the approval of items 7.1 through 7.5. Do I have a second? Ms. Brooks, all in favor? 6-0. So the Board of Education committees are appointed for the school year, and I believe largely remain similar or the same as last year. Moving on, I'd like to make a motion to approve both the policy manual and the Board of Education meeting calendar. The actual topics are subject to change, but the calendar and the cadence should be roughly what you see on this calendar. So I'd like to make a motion to approve items 8.1 through 9.1. Through the second. All in favor? Sorry, Ms. Brooks. I looked at you, I didn't say your name. Ms. Brooks, all in favor? Ms. Alvarez, are you? Okay. 6-0. So that concludes our reorganizational meeting at this time. I think we actually do need to, I guess we're not, so we're not going to, okay, so we're going to flow right into the next meeting. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to move right into our business meeting. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion to approve the July 16th, 2026 Board of Educational meeting agenda. Do I have a second? Ms. Mawani, all in favor? 6-0. Okay, so tonight's meeting agenda is approved. Moving on to the next item, which is the opening statement of the president. I want to take this time to acknowledge that, as a Board of Education and as a school district, one of the greatest things that we have is that we're here and we're watching all of the students progress throughout their career in the school district. And every once in a while, unfortunately, we have students who don't have that opportunity. So I want to take a moment, I want to ask the board for a moment of silence for one of our students who we lost recently, Logan Coyle, and just take a moment to remember him. Okay. And with that, I'll turn the meeting to the superintendent, Dr. Posse.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good evening and welcome to our first meeting of the 26-27 school year. Before I begin, I want to congratulate every student who recently celebrated a moving up ceremony or graduation. Each of these milestones reflect years of hard work, growth, and achievement. We're enormously proud of our students and wish them continued success in the year ahead. I want to thank our principals, teachers, support staff, and especially our facilities department for their outstanding work in making these celebrations so successful. I also want to welcome Leah, our new ex officio student representative. We're delighted to have you join the board this year and look forward to working with you and hearing your perspective. Turning to tonight's agenda, we will begin with an update on elementary class sizes. As you know, we have closely monitored enrollment throughout the summer, and Dr. Shields will review our current projections this evening. Because enrollment continues to shift as families move into and out of the district, these figures remain preliminary. We expect to provide a final update in August when we will finalize the number of classroom sections for the coming school year. You'll also notice on tonight's agenda in the personnel section that we have selected a new middle school assistant principal who is a familiar face to the district. I want to congratulate Dr. Kelly Marzucci, who is being recommended for this role. Dr. Marzucci brings a rich and varied background in instructional leadership to this role. She currently serves as our technology staff developer for pre-K through grade 12, where she leads district-wide professional development. Her prior experience includes 7 years as a 6th grade classroom teacher in the Oceanside School District. Dr. Marzucci holds a doctorate in instructional leadership from St. John's University, along with advanced certificates in both school district and school building leadership. We're confident that her experience, her energy, and her collaborative spirit will be a wonderful addition to our Weber Middle School community, and we congratulate her on this appointment. Beyond tonight's agenda, I'd like to share a few additional updates with the board, beginning with our facilities department. Since school closed, our facilities department has been advancing an extensive slate of capital projects, preventative maintenance, and building upgrades across every school and district facility. This work includes classroom air conditioning installations, flooring and ceiling replacements, lighting and electrical upgrades, painting, safety, security enhancements, HVAC and mechanical work, and targeted site improvements. In fact, the reason we're having this meeting here and not at Sousa is because of the extensive construction happening in that building. We anticipate this work will be complete before students and staff return in September. I also want to provide the board with an update since our last June meeting. At our June meeting, we held an important discussion regarding the use of school-issued devices. Since then, we've begun implementing several of the immediate actions identified. Devices have been removed from our pre-K classrooms. Our principals will remind their staff that elementary students should not be permitted to use devices during indoor recess. We've also begun expanding charging carts in our elementary schools so that students can leave their devices at school rather than take them home each evening. The carts have been selected, ordering is underway, and our technology and facilities department are coordinating deployment upon arrival. The carts will be placed in all K-5 classrooms. In addition, we have upgraded our Go Guardian license to include the new Screen Time Insights dashboard, a capability our previous license did not support. This gives us a clearer picture of how students are actually spending their time on district-issued devices, including the ability to distinguish in-school and out-of-school usage, identify where screen time is highest across schools and classrooms, and see which apps and app categories are driving that usage. This data will help us make more informed decisions about technology practices and policies going forward. That work will continue this fall as the PGCD Technology Committee takes up the broader review we discussed with the board at our June meeting, examining classroom technology practices with teachers across grade levels, gathering parent feedback, and considering current research and best practices. Our goal remains the same: to ensure that technology is used intentionally to support learning while promoting the well-being of our students. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Posse. At this time, we'd like to move to community comments. As usual, those wishing to speak must sign at the podium, keep their comments to 3 minutes, and state your full name at the start of comments. Keep them as brief as possible and relating to school matters. I believe Ms. Preston, you had signed up, and if anybody else wishes to speak, you can come sign up right after.
It's very exciting, so thank you. My name is Shannon Preston. In September, I'll have 2 students at Sousa Elementary and a 6th grader at Weber. As a result of June's BOE meeting, I want to express my gratitude to the board and administration for working toward ensuring that elementary students are no longer required to take their devices to and from school each day, and for the amazing announcements you just made. I'd like to focus these remarks on making you all aware of the dangers that lurk within the internet browsing access on students' personal devices and the current solution, which seeks to block access to certain words and websites, or simply make parents and educators aware that a word or website was accessed. Note that I'm not particularly savvy. I simply sat with the Chromebook for less than 30 minutes and uncovered the following. I Googled choice words and was met with Google Gemini AI generated search results that prompted additional questions and answers, which I was able to read in detail. I will not share aloud the results, but will hand a copy of my screenshots to Dr. Feeney after my remarks. I was able to visit the Planned Parenthood website. I support Planned Parenthood, but don't want my young children to have access to the information on their website. I was able to read about a patient's story and watch an embedded YouTube video detailing her story, despite the fact that YouTube is blocked on student devices. I then Googled a word that I learned on the website and was greeted by several news headlines about a person who was recently convicted of a horrible crime. I was able to click on the corresponding news articles and read the article, pictures, and details associated with the crime. I went to the Barstool Sports website where I watched a string of viral video clips. The issue this exercise makes obvious is simple. There are simply too many words and sites to block. Blocking terms and sites is not an effective strategy for controlling access. The administration will respond by saying that Go Guardian is the solution, but it is not. The Go Guardian restrictions that I put on my children's device are only on the device when it is at home. Likewise, teachers are not monitoring the Go Guardian app when students have access to their devices in the hallways during dismissal, etc. Teachers are, of course, not monitoring the Go Guardian app every second of the day, nor should they be. Similarly, since all of the inappropriate words and websites can't be blocked individually, I tried blocking internet access altogether, but then the Chromebook was unable to access Google Docs, MyPath, etc., which my daughter needed to do her homework. When I block Google.com to disable the ability to search random
30
words,
seconds.
she can't access the Google Suite that students use for shared docs, homework assignments, etc. I'm sharing this information with the following goal. Internet browsing should be disabled on the student-issued devices. The district should be selecting the sites that they do want to see versus blocking the sites and search results they shouldn't see. Generally, it is my hope, and I think yours as well, that the district will start to take a more proactive approach versus a reactive one when it comes to all aspects of technology and personal device use. Thank you.
Are there any additional speakers? Thank you. If you wouldn't mind just stating your name and signing it with in your speech.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Tam. I'm the mother of 3, and my oldest is a rising first grader at Sousa. I'm here tonight because my son would come home from pre-K daily, exhausted because his teacher showed videos during nap time. He was too distracted by the screen to sleep. When I spoke to the teacher, her response was not to turn off the TV, but to move my son to a corner where his view was partially blocked from the glare and stimulation of the screen. In pre-K and kindergarten, we continued to watch entire episodes of TV shows and countless YouTube videos at school, including during snack time, dismissal, and every holiday and celebration. He told me about 3 movies he watched in 3 consecutive weeks. He told me that instead of singing happy birthday to classmates, the teacher would put on music videos and the kids would silently stare at the screen instead of facing each other to sing and celebrate together. My son has also sat through 5 days of iReady math testing 1 week this spring, with additional testing 2 other times over the year, plus the same amount of testing and reading. Confused by his test results, I spoke to his teacher and she told me he would, quote, shut down in front of the iPad, completely dazed by the screen. She explained that iReady does not test what is taught and instead asks 5- and 6-year-olds about fractions and other topics they are not expected to know. She explained that iReady does not tell her which questions a child gets wrong or provide any concrete examples or feedback to improve. She acknowledged that it had limited diagnostic value and that my son's iReady results did not reflect how he was doing in class. I've also personally seen my son open the quote-unquote educational apps on his district-issued iPad and hit random buttons to make the game or animation work, too distracted to understand the concept they are supposed to be teaching. In the words of Jonathan Haidt, the leading social psychologist and author of The Anxious Generation, today, screen time spent on screens expands like a gas to fill every available moment. What's worse, much of that gas is at best purely entertainment and at worst actively harmful, if not in its content, then in its opportunity costs, in how it robs kids of opportunities for human instruction, social interaction, independent play, and other developmentally important activities. Families and schools across the country have recently started to wake up to the gas filling the room, and districts have recently enacted new limits on screens in schools across the country, from LA and San Diego to closer districts like Maplewood, New Jersey, and Croton, New York. When I voiced these concerns to a few other parents in my son's class, I heard a resounding chorus of agreement. Some of us circulated a letter to a small group of first grade families at Sousa, and in just 24 hours, 90 parents asked to co-sign it, even parents we didn't know. People were literally coming out of the woodwork to sign, which I think just shows how many families care about these issues and how hungry they are for change. In the letter we emailed you all earlier today, we asked that the district re-examine the use of technology in schools and set appropriate limits on the types and amounts of screen time at school, particularly in light of the growing body of research showing that excessive screen time is harmful and that digital tools are less effective in producing positive learning outcomes when compared to human instruction and pencil and paper.
Thank you. Are there any additional speakers? Yes.
I'm trying 1 second. My name is Diana Delgado Collar. I am a Sousa parent, and I agree with my fellow, it's really hard to zoom. Yeah, thank you. Should I start? Can we start the timer over here? Yeah. Okay, here? Okay, thank you. So my name is Diana Delgado Collar. I'm a SUSA parent, and I agree with my fellow parents of SUSA. And thank you for the charging station updates, and thank you for sharing that letter. We hope to expand the reach of this letter and hope to get to you all those names and signatures as well. I had 3 points. One of them was charging stations, but we received the update. Thank you very much. And so I will move on with my next 2 points, which was, first of all, how do we measure success? Is it measured by student scores? I think so. I can't think of another way of measuring it. So, and if there is another way, please let me know. But I think it's by student scores. And so I was wondering if we could measure the student scores using iReady and all the e-learning apps that we're using now and compare that to those scores before. I would just like, as a stakeholder of this community, to understand the value that these expensive applications are delivering to our children and providing them in education. I don't think that I think in about a year and a half ago, I was in a meeting and somebody asked this question as well. I don't believe there's been a follow-up on that end, so I just wanted to follow up on this, and if someone could please let me know how and when we will be receiving that data, so we can assess it as parents and make comments as needed. My second point is, could there be an opt-out for parents who are overwhelmed by technology or don't want to use this technology at home? And I appreciate the carts being available now at school, and my understanding is that therefore perhaps our children will no longer be required to shuttle them back and forth. But what about assignments or any things that require this, but could also have been used, but could also have been done on paper with paper and pencil? Could there be an opt-out option for parents to have? And I would appreciate your response. And I don't know how to get their response, and I'd appreciate your help understanding how we get responses from our questions posed here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any additional speakers? No? Okay. So just to clarify for the community in general, the board policy regarding questions is that the board endeavors to answer questions that are typically relating to things that the board is able to answer, not usually, so depending on the breadth and the depth of the question, we're either able to answer it or we aren't. We don't typically use those questions to create additional business for the board or the district. However, I do believe a lot of the questions that were just asked were answered in our technology presentation, and a lot of that is an ongoing work in progress. I would encourage you to watch the June presentation, and I would also, a lot of what you asked, I would direct Dr. Feeney would be able to answer. I'm sure he would give you the time to answer those questions. We will review them though, and what is possible and appropriate for the board to answer, we answer during old business at our next meeting. Okay. Great. At this time, we're going to move on to our only discussion item of the night, which is an update for the board on elementary enrollment and potential staffing changes relating to that. And Dr. Shields, I just want to note before you start that I'm looking at this presentation and I don't see the word draft in big letters across it. So I think it's very important to emphasize that we're still only in July and we still do have numbers waiting to come in, correct?
We certainly do.
And anything is subject to change
Yes,
until the day school
this
starts.
is like a living document, as you might call it. Correct. So to get the big picture, I just wanted to share with you the numbers that I normally share with you each board meeting. Kindergarten through 12th grade, as of July 8th, we had 5,036 students. That's 48 students less than we closed the school year with. So that was 5,036 students. Looking specifically at our incoming kindergarten class, we had projected 368 students, and we currently have 329 incoming kindergarten students. I'll speak a little bit more to that as we go through the slides. So the goal of this presentation is to give the board some insight into how our elementary class sizes are shaping up for September. And as Dr. Posse said, we're going to give you another update come August. Because as you understand already, that these numbers are routinely and consistently changing. So the page 2 there, you have Daly Elementary School's general education classes. So Daly has 19 sections, which is unchanged from where they were this past year. Keep in mind that when you look at that number of 358 students, we also have our pre-K program, and we also have some self-contained classes there. So from a school as a whole perspective, they have 455 students. But we're focusing here on our class sizes. So you can see that the classes range anywhere from 21 students to 16. As we move on to Guggenheim, they have 25 sections, which is one less than they had this past year. We had originally planned for them to have 5 sections of kindergarten, but it looks like they only need 3 so far. As we look at Manor Haven, they have 22 sections, which is one less than they had this past year. But we are monitoring closely the enrollment of their first grade. You'll notice that they, as of right now, have classes of 22, 23, and 23, which is close to our maximum size of 23 in grades K through 2. South Salem, they have 21 sections of classes, which is unchanged from this past year. And you can see that they range from 18 students at the lower end, 17 students at the lower end to 23 students in one class of the 5th grade. As we go to Sousa Elementary School, they have 27 sections, which is one less than they had last year. Those classes range from 18 to 20. So I think from a big picture perspective, as I stated earlier, we're 39 students short of where we had anticipated our incoming kindergarten class to come in. But looking at our class sizes as we've established them so far, we still do have room to grow given the current number of sections. 2 of the kindergarten positions that we have in the budget have been reallocated to Math AIS. And that is based on what we're seeing in the spring iReady data showing greater student need in the area of mathematics. You've already heard me say that we're going to continue to monitor Manor Haven's first grade. And part of the process that we go through in the summer is that we are reviewing and finalizing paraprofessional staffing based on student needs. Sometimes what we learn during that process is that we may need less paraprofessionals based on students' IEPs as they've closed out during the spring season, and then we adjust potential savings in that area if those numbers are coming in lower. And we have a district-wide meeting for that next week. So overall, I just wanted to let you know, this past year we had 121 elementary classroom sections. We're looking to have 118 this coming school year. That's a reduction of 3 sections. We budgeted 1 in the budget going down, and it looks like we're going to have 2 more being reallocated to the Math AIS. Are there any questions? Ms. Brooks.
Thank you for keeping us up to date, and we've been apprised along the way, not only just right now, but really been very diligent about that, so I personally appreciate that. I understand you're keeping an eye on Manor Haven on the first grade. If there is additional enrollment for the first grade at Manor Haven, would, I guess, would you consider adding a fourth first grade section? And if you do, will you have to reduce the positions that were reallocated to math AIS, or would you have the staffing for a fourth section?
Right, so that would be a conversation that we would have. How are we going to fill that extra position at that first grade level? There's a couple of different ways to look at that. Do we seek funds elsewhere in the budget? For example, if we have less needs for paraprofessionals because our CSE numbers came in lower, we could then reallocate some of the funds from there into that general ed classroom.
So it's already something you're considering as a
Absolutely.
as a possibility.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Ms. Ellis?
Yeah, and just to be clear, just to underscore what Dr. Shields just said, if our Manor Haven numbers, what we're looking to see if there's any decrease in enrollment, because we're still seeing students who are we're still seeing into and out of the district. So if the numbers remain the same or they grow, we expect to add a section to Manor Haven first grade, just to be very clear.
As a reminder, the board had committed in last year's budget to maintain one under policy. So while we're not at policy in first grade at Manor Haven, we are above the commitment. So we would look to the district to fix that unless there was not a way we could do so.
Yes, and so one of the staffing figures that are still unknown is the paraprofessional staffing, because we budget based on current student needs. And then, as Dr. Shields said, the CSE meetings happen well after the budget process. So now that they've all been finalized, now, as is typical, we do this every year, we readjust based on actual needs. Sometimes needs grow, sometimes needs are less. So once we have that picture, we'll be able to tell you how we would fund the additional section if those numbers are truly stable or if they grow.
Ms. Alvarez.
Just to clarify, for the reallocated positions to the math AIS, those were reallocated to those positions because of the ratio need with them to fulfill that, correct? Not for any other reason. So it is a need there.
Yes, you know what, over the last, just by way of context, over the last year or so, the district has standardized its RTI process. So our teachers and administrators came up with a new RTI plan. We have committed to implement that plan as written, which sets very low group sizes for students that are in need of academic intervention services. So in order to keep to those small group sizes, there is a need to allocate 2 additional positions to Math AIS. We happen to be able to do it from the kindergarten enrollment. Otherwise, we would have waited to see how the whole staffing picture worked out before making that shift. So that is the reason. Also, from a proportion standpoint, there's nothing that should be construed as alarming regarding the increase in Math AIS. We have significantly more reading teachers than we do math teachers. Part of that is that part of that is a result of this new RTI plan that the district has put in place and implementing with fidelity.
All set, everyone? So, Dr. Shields, I do want to, again, stress again that, as we've stated, this is all draft. Nobody should expect that these are necessarily the final numbers. And in the past, this has been a very, I guess, nebulous process that was somewhat opaque to the community. However, you guys have done this every single year behind the scenes. And it's really this year and a little bit last year that we've kind of opened up that process to the board and the community in real time. And I just want to stress again, nothing alarming, normal process, and we're endeavoring to make sure that all of our commitments to the community are met and that all the students have appropriate class sizes, and we thank you very much for your leadership on that.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So at this time, we're going to move to some business, and then we have some more discussions later on. So I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the June 16th, 2026 BOE meeting minutes, the June 17th, 26 audit committee meeting minutes, the June 12th, 26 curriculum committee meeting minutes, and that's it. Do I have a second? Ms. Brooks always likes to second minutes, and all in favor? 7-0. And, oh yes, 6-0. The minutes are approved. I don't believe it's possible that we could have any committee reports. So we're going to skip committee reports. We're going to move on to our consent agenda. So I would like to make a motion to approve item 8.1 through I'd like to see it myself. I believe you. Through 14.3. All in favor? Oh, sorry, do I have a second? Ms. Malwani? Seconded? Yep. Okay, all in favor?
Can you just clarify the numbers? Did you say 8.2?
8.1 through 14.3.
9.1.
9.1 through 14.3. And then we're going to move on to policy next, which starts at 15.1. So it's page 30 of 34, I guess is the last page, or 31 of 34. But if you want to see the number, it's on 29 of 34. Okay, so we're approved, 6-0? Okay, the consent agenda is approved. I wanted to thank some donors for their donations. No, actually, I'm sorry, we don't have any donations on this one. So I believe Ms. Malconi had wanted to say something, so give her the floor.
I just wanted to point out for the community's benefit, 11.1 of the consent agenda renames our Office of Pupil Personnel Services to the Office of Student Supports. I'm very excited to see the name change. I hope that that is an easier nomenclature, is that the right way to say it? Or title for families looking for student services and where they can find them. So I'm looking forward to that name change.
Okay. So at this time, we have several policies up for adoption. We have 15.1, which is approval of policy 4327, homebound instruction for adoption. 15.2, approval of policy 5151, students in temporary housing pursuant to the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. We have 15.3, approval to rescind policy 5311.1, student dress code. 15.4, approval of policy 6710, purchasing authority. 15.5, which is first read of policy 5995 for student personal electronic devices. So I'm going to make a motion for the approval of policies of items 15.1 through 15.4, and then we'll discuss the first read on 15.5. So do I have a second on those four policies? Ms. Melkonian, all in favor? You mean my reading it so well wasn't adequate for you? It only crosses 2 pages, page 31 and 32. Yeah, okay. I saw Sandra, you already raised your hand, right? Yeah, okay, so those policies are approved. At this time, we're going to move to 15.5, which is first read of policy 5695, students and personal electronic devices. Do we have anybody who wants to speak on that policy? Ms. Brooks?
So we started to discuss at the June meeting. Oh, by the way, there are regulations forthcoming for policy 4327, homebound instruction. So be on the lookout for those. So we started to have a conversation about fine-tuning
the students and personal electronic devices policy back in June. We had a very, very, very rough draft of the points that were being suggested by other board members for further development in the policy. And so what you see, what the public sees in front of them is a red line markup version of the current policy, where you see the current language in black type, except for where we start with enforcement, tier consequences, and reporting, and down to the end, that should also be in black type. I think it's showing up in green, but nothing was changed from enforcement, tier consequences, and reporting down. I think that's on the 4th page of the draft. But really the meat of it is whether students should be permitted to have access to their personal devices in an emergency and how that is defined, and also being a little more specific about the exception of using a personal device for an educational purpose. So I just wanted to set the groundwork for people who are just tuning in now. This is a continuation of the discussion that we had in June. Nothing has changed on this draft from June. What you saw in June is also what you're seeing here. No work has been done on it because there's been no formal board discussion about what should happen here. Just wanted to say that. So I'm not, as the former chairperson of the policy committee and not having had a policy committee meeting since June, I'm just trying to lay the groundwork for that. And Ms. Malconey and Ms. Malwani are welcome to jump in, but I thought it was important to just start off on that. And I guess we break it down and we say, number one, do we want the emergency exception to be a little more beefed up because the law allows for students to have access in an emergency, and then we can go on to the educational use.
So my first question, and I want to try to narrow the conversation a little bit, is as it relates to actual emergencies, does the law effectively permit it anywhere, or do we actually need to make this change to the policy with, for example, alternative one? Like if we didn't do that and there was like a real, life and death emergency, do we actually need that language there from a practical standpoint?
Well, the law, the actual statute allows, it says end, I'm trying to think of what the exact language is, end in.
I think the law gives a list, and in the list is in an emergency.
But
It's
doesn't
very
define.
bare bones.
But I guess,
And leaves
but
it
is
to
it,
the
Of
districts.
exceptions we could grant.
but I guess what
Correct.
I'm saying is, in the event of like a true like life, death, property, all those kind of emergencies, we probably don't actually need to do anything like that. Like it's ostensibly already covered either through the law or practical reasons, right? So what we're really talking about is the topic of kind of the second tier of like, I guess, academic emergency. Is that?
No, not really, because
In
the
an
opening
alternative
paragraph, we're actually saying that during emergencies, student use of devices can distract students. And so there's no provision currently in this policy for students to be able to use their device, their personal device, in the event of an emergency. We don't have that here. We
Right.
didn't include it. In fact, it was purposefully removed during the policy meeting discussions.
Why?
Because, so I actually raised this question prior to policy when the first paragraph, and this was based on the NISPA template, where the first paragraph talked about how the use of devices during an emergency, but meaning an emergency like, God forbid, a million times an active shooter or a flood or a fire, could be distracting for students. And then later on in the policy it said, but students can use it in the event of an emergency. And I said, that to me creates a conundrum. Either it's distracting and the students shouldn't use it, or now you're saying students should use it, and council said, strike the, you can use it in the event of an emergency. And I think all of the districts were in a rush to get this rolled out because we had a deadline, I think, of August. And this mandate came down very, very quickly from the legislature. Templates came in from from the New York State School Boards Association. We were really working under a time constraint without the ability to really think through the ramifications of what does it mean to strike this language, which the legislature said we actually could have in the policy, but we struck it. And so in hindsight, there is a way to thread the needle where we're not now under the same kind of time pressure. And that's why you see more extensive language. You see alternative 1, you see alternative 2, and then you see a list of when it wouldn't be permitted for a student to have their own device or when it would be permitted. And so we were able to tease through and differentiate, distinguish between an emergency where you want a student to be able to pay attention to what the adult is saying in a, let's say, a life-threatening emergency versus if the student has an individual emergency or there's an emergency from home where the student, there's no risk, the risk of distraction is not going to be life-threatening to the student or staff or other students. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
So you're asking us as a board if we want alternative 1 or alternative 2? Is that basically the question?
Or some variation of alternative 1 or alternative 2. It's, they can be synthesized. It's not necessarily an either or. I mean, neither alternative addresses the individual case of a student.
Right.
Who may have a medical emergency or maybe a family member has passed away or some other emergency at home.
Right.
So I think both alternatives need to not limit an emergency to immediate risk to life, health, property, or the environment.
And would we limit that to phones, so we wouldn't have like students taking out like MacBooks to say they were like emailing about an emergency at home or something along
Well,
those
it's a
lines?
personal device.
Right.
So it's any personal device that can connect to the internet really is what is banned. And so with a personal device, I guess, could be an Apple Watch, it could be a MacBook, but all of those devices that connect to the internet are outside of the school.
I think the questions that would be most helpful to understand the board's reaction to as we head into the policy season in September is first, a sense of the board. Does the board want this policy to include language around emergencies? And if so, I think then we can talk about to what extent does the term emergency need to be defined for the purposes of this policy. So I think the first question is really, does the board want this in the policy?
So why don't we just ask for a show of hands on that and just try to end that piece of the conversation. So who would like emergency defined?
Who would like it in the policy, or who would like it defined in the policy?
I guess same.
It's not the same. It's
So
not
ask,
really
ask
the
both
same.
questions then.
Who wants it more elaborated than it is
So
currently?
before,
We had nothing except for this preliminary paragraph that mentioned an emergency, and New York State allows us to add in an emergency or some variation, which a lot of districts have, but they'll have other wording. So I think that Jess is correct. I agree. Like, the first threshold is, do we think we want to put that exception in the policy that needs to be iterated in policy?
So let's ask that question.
I think that's the first question. And then the second one is,
Well, let's
do we
ask the
think it
first.
needs to be defined and how?
Let's ask the first
right?
question, and then we'll take
Yeah,
it from there. So would you like to pose the question, then we'll just take a kind of a sense of the board show of hands?
Sure. The question is, should this policy include language around emergencies and emergency situations?
You guys have to vote too. You have to vote too. So say yes if you want it, I guess.
So
By show of hands, who would like the policy to include language around emergencies?
I don't actually have a strong feeling about it, but I'll say yes, I guess. So I guess
By a show of hands, who would not like it? But 4 are in favor of it, so I think that's the direction of the board, and the committee can work on that.
I think that was like 4.5 in favor, right? Is that a half?
three
Okay,
and a half, but
so-
yeah, that's enough.
Okay, so we will work on that now. Is there any preference now, alternative, I'm not quite sure the difference, I feel, between alternative 1 and alternative 2, but, and I also didn't understand I don't know who wrote alternative 2, but the very last sentence, district staff may also grant enforcement exceptions if a student is unable to secure staff permission at the time of a situation later deemed to be a qualifying emergency. I don't understand what that means.
As the half voter in the middle, I will say that I think it should be acknowledged and kept as like short and narrow as possible. Like literally say, in the event of an emergency, you can use a device. And I don't think we should like try to contemplate what the emergencies are, which ones like that would be bananas if we were to try to figure out like which emergencies we want phones and which one. Like I would say, I'll change my vote if that's the path that we're going down.
But the question is, the question is, do all emergencies warrant a student having a personal device? So, for example, if there is a disaster.
The high school to work that out at the time, and like practicality to work it out.
But that might, but it's up to the board, I think, to define. It's up to to define what there needs to be some guidance, because a district administrator might say, well, we're not going to let the students use them if there's, I mean, I keep going to active shooter because that's where all the kids start to take out the phones. I'm not inviting that on our district. But in an event like that.
How about a flood? How about a flood? How about a smoke event? How about?
Right. So how will people know? How will there be notice?
I think that when there's like a clear emergency, that I think that when it's clear that there's a clear emergency, people will, as the Supreme Court justice once said, I'll know it when I see it. And I don't know how else to.
Okay, I'll just say that. So New York City actually has in their policy that if a student is ill and needs to use their phone, they can do that. I mean, we can write into our policy when we want students to have access.
But I hear you. I'm just saying I don't think we should. You all can, everyone have their own opinion. I'm just giving my opinion is that it should just be like in an emergency, and that's it. Because I think that otherwise it creates so much door opening for so many, she said, he said, so many potential, like I think we're like torturing ourselves over something that is like, if there's an emergency, people are gonna know they need to use their phone. And if we write here that you can't use your phone during a fire, and somebody's trapped in a closet, they're gonna take their phone out and call. And if they're not, and they see people walking out their front door, they're gonna walk with them out their front door.
The exact same reasons why I voted against it. Yeah. Everything you just said is the reasons why I said no to adding this wording elaboration to what the existing policy is because it was going to be everything that was in the purple, green, whatever colors of alternatives is too vague, too much he said, she said, and the other part of it is what I pose is then if we are allowing for whatever language, then shouldn't the students be allowed to have in possession their personal devices so that they have the ability to use it in the case of an emergency, which would be against the actual policy itself that was intended, that is listed, because it's in the policy, it says locker rooms, wherever the locations are. I forget the exact locations.
You're right.
But for me, the real part of it is the practice that occurred this past year were students' phones confiscated because they use it in an emergency with a fire. And someone in the district actually gave a detention for a student using it in an emergency. If that was not the case, if the staff were flexible and fair in outcomes, then why are we making it more confusing on year 2 with any sort of attempt at language? Because in my eyes, you brought up all the reasons why I would be like, of course, a fire, the actual definition of the word emergency, which is listed on one of them correctly, on one of the alternatives correctly, which would be real reasons, again, in my eyes, if a student was actually given detention or phone taken away and a real emergency as defined legally, then I think that parent will be able to fight that.
So to your point, then what would be wrong with just literally adding a sentence that?
Well, the question would be for the members of the board, what is the intent of elaborating the word emergency? Is the intent of elaborating the word emergency to go beyond fire, risk of life, loss of property?
The objective and
damage?
commonly held definition of emergency,
Yeah.
which I think we do need an objective definition in a policy in order for it to be enforced.
Which, that would be the second question. So if the intent of the board is to further the definition of emergency, then I wonder what your vote would be at that point. But
Well, I don't think that's true, because what I'm saying is that clearly, to your point, if somebody got detention for calling the fire department, then we have a lack in here that the policy was, that common sense was not used. So we need to make sure that the policy applies common sense, which says in the event of an emergency, you can use your phone. Now, to me, that doesn't mean that means that every student gets to carry a phone in case there is an emergency, but it means that, like, if you're near your phone and you happen to have it and an emergency occurs, you're not going to get a detention for using it. And to me, that's just common sense.
so because of the sense of the board was to allow it, an elaboration, I would be comfortable with the single sentence of a definition of emergency, loss of life, property, I forget the third, risk.
How about just emergency without a definition?
That's what, was that not the,
Well, the term emergency, absent any context or definition, is open to interpretation, right? My emergency, and also from a parent's perspective, what I think is an emergency for my child is different than what you may think of as an emergency for your child, right? There are some things that we all hold as an emergency, but there are some that we don't.
What if you said, like, literally emergency, parentheses, imminent threat to, like, life, liberty, property, close quote, that's it. Yeah.
it is, one of the alternatives has the exact wording, except for it added 5 more sentences with it. So I think it's alternative 2.
No, alternative 1.
No, alternative 1 elaborated a little bit more.
But we should maybe do alternative 1 in just the first sentence.
No, because alternative 1 wrote health. It's risk to person, property, or the environment, and requires urgent action to avoid harmful outcomes. It was,
that's perfect.
the word life, health, or someone added that. That's not the legal, that's not
So the first sentence of
definition.
alternative 2 also seems perfect.
I am comfortable with that language, which is a common and widely held understanding of emergency. I drafted the alternative, so in trying to find a point of compromise in this discussion. So I think, just to be clear, I don't think students should not have access to phones in emergency situations. But I think if we are going to codify that in policy, it must be defined. And I'm comfortable with the definition here, but if the intent is for a broader definition to be held or for it to be more flexible, then I think that's something that I would not be comfortable with, and why I voted not to include the language at all.
I'm not hearing anybody saying that except Jeff, right? Man, we didn't hear from you or Rachel on this, but it sounds like I spoke, and it sounded like Sandra and Jess, you both were kind of on the same page that we're okay with saying emergency with this kind of like common sense definition and full stop, right? You're okay with that? Yeah. Only if you're making it short.
So I'm actually okay with where you started. I feel like emergency has a common understanding. I actually think that we're creating more confusion when we put the definition in there, because I think emergency is, although we have a dictionary definition, I think it does vary by circumstance, right? And so to try to codify, like, how broad is an emergency in the setting of a high school, right? Because hopefully it's not all a student who's cut their hand off at the wrist, right, and is spurting blood. Like, right, but those are not emergencies. I guess I think there's a common understanding of emergency, and to me, I keep going back in my head to what is the purpose of this being allowed to be put in as an emergency, right? Why did New York State list this? It's common sense, right? It's common sense that students should not be getting in trouble if they pull their device out in something that is an emergency or something that they see as an emergency with the eyes of a 15-year-old, right? That should be a conversation. And I don't want there to be a situation where a building administrator feels that they need to give this student a punishment because that's what's fair, because that's what we've codified. And so for consistency, they have to give a punishment. And so I see this exception as putting a common sense loophole in for both students and for administrators so that nobody feels backed into a corner. And I think if we codify the language, not that any students are reading this policy in advance, right? Let's be honest. But if we codify it, I think we are in effect making it narrower than what it actually should be. Because I think there should be room for a 15-year-old's emergency. And I think probably all of us who are parents can imagine the things that are a die of embarrassment level situation, emergency that is not actually a risk to anybody's life or health, but it is a risk to their reputation or social standing in the school. And they're that worried and they need to make a phone call. And I just don't want anybody to get punishment for that. And I don't want any administrator to feel that they have to punish something like that. So
I feel that's
would leave it
but for me, that's crossing the line. Like to me, that's the kind of emergency that I wouldn't want someone saying is an emergency because it's so not the common definition of emergency. So to me, what I would like to make sure of is if there's a 911 level emergency and a student takes out their phone and calls 911, that, I'm not being that specific, but to me, that's an emergency. So to me, I left my saxophone at home and I'm going to be humiliated in
that's not what I'm
saxophone
talking
class,
about. Right?
But how would you draw the line?
I mean, first of all, most students who forget their saxophone are walking into the courtyard of Schreiber and texting and asking for the saxophone. I think we could ask our school board member, but I think that's what's happening. I'm talking about a different level of emergency, and I think the thing that we have to take into account is that these students are living in an environment that looks different, right? So, for example, if I had an emergency when I was in high school and I did not want to go to the school nurse and I did not want to go to the administrator, I went to the basement of my high school and I took my quarter out and I called home on the payphone. And we don't have any payphones.
Right.
So there is no possibility for a student to communicate out of the building for those kind of moments.
They can't go to the office and make a call.
They could. I could have also, right? But there are I just think that this is way past what the intent of this law was, right? We don't want it to be a distraction to their learning. We don't want it, but I think a distraction to their learning is also, oh my God, am I going to get caught making this phone call when this is
So I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to give Julie's listening, and she just sent me something. So she says she gives me, say again. So Julie sends a text. This is a copy and paste from the Distraction-Free Schools guidelines. Emergency is defined as sudden, unforeseen crisis, such as medical issues, family emergencies, or critical transportation changes. During these events, students and parents are advised to communicate through official school channels to maintain safety and compliance with the state's ban on personal internet-enabled devices. So so with the state, if you follow the law, they really are saying that the emergencies are emergencies. Because those things that were just listed are not.
Did Julie send it to us?
She sent it to me.
Sorry to clarify, you said can you forward
Well,
the document?
it says that emergencies such as unforeseen crisis, such as medical issues, during these events, students and parents are advised to communicate through official school channels to maintain safety and compliance with the state's ban. So they don't.
If a student is having a medical emergency, they should go to the nurse and contact home through the nurse's office, not calling them on their cell phone.
Right. But that's different than an emergency.
So I think it's not surprising here, but I'm pretty sure that New York State has actually been very unclear because part of what created the problem with our policy is that we followed the NISPA sample policy, which had this contradictory emergency wording.
Yeah.
I didn't see any guidance from New York State on what they meant as an exception.
Right. So can I-
There is, I don't know
I
what the
understand
source is
Sandra's
of that
gonna
either.
speak, but I want to just make a suggestion, and then, which is, it sounds like this does have to go back to policy, and it sounds like the sense of the board is that we do want it to say emergency, but as narrow as possible. But I don't think we can hash out what you're bringing up versus what, like Sandra was saying, right now here, because we don't have the full picture. But it sounds like we're just gonna work on like a sentence.
All due respect, I think we do have the full picture, and I thought that we all decided to do it here so that it could be in the code of conduct come fall.
That's fine.
I mean, well, my understanding was that we were going to address some of these questions and then bring it back to policy to wordsmith it and deliver it.
But what I'm saying is, it sounds like we have a sense, which is that we definitely want it to say emergencies. It sounds like we all agree that it should be narrow, where we.
I don't agree with that.
From my standpoint, well, you said you wanted to be narrow, Rachel. You actually want it to be so narrow that it's not broadly defined, so that there's some wiggle room. I don't think that's narrow.
What I'm saying is, I would
want to say emergency.
I would do what New York State has said we are allowed to do, which is to carve out an exception for emergencies. I would use that bare bone language, which other districts have done, and then I would trust our administrators to hash out the details, right? And trust them to say, hey, that's not an emergency. Come on, it doesn't pass the straight face test. Or like, I'm going to have sympathy, and now I know I don't have to give you a punishment for this.
Yeah. Well, that's what I think is what we're all looking for. Sandra, you're up.
What did you read from? What did she send again, to clarify?
It says Governor Hochul's distraction-free schools guidelines define.
The guidelines, okay.
She didn't send me the whole thing, so it's a little bit clear to define. Emergencies as sudden, unforeseen crises, such as medical issues, family emergencies, or critical transportation changes. And it says, during these events, students and parents are advised to communicate through official school office channels to maintain safety and compliance with the state's ban. So I'm not seeing
So I mean, we got further guidance, right? So this is further guidance. I think this is a difference of opinion. And for me, again, I'll reiterate that I think by adding anything more than the actual definition of emergency with risk to life, property, I think that we are doing a disservice to the staff to have to work through validating, and I think it opens it up more, whereas if we allow them to do what they did this past year and give it another year to evaluate. Again, I did not hear any community comments from the last year, nor do I remember any email from the last year from a student facing a consequence where the board should elaborate more than what we just discussed.
Right.
So that's my opinion of, unless we see a difference of how the enforcement is happening, and we have a student ex officio board member, and maybe this year that could be something that is reviewed, that, hey, we are getting reprimanded, we are getting detentions that you don't know about, we are getting soft warnings that are intimidating, until we get that kind of feedback, I don't know why we're elaborating more. And the district, the cabinet, the principals, they didn't ask for further clarification on this, so that's where I'm at.
But to your point, it sounds like it was misapplied. So that's the only issue, right? And I don't know if that's true. It's like I'm hearing it from you for the first time about a detention for somebody calling, and I'm sure it's true.
No one has. I'm saying no one. I've never heard of anyone
Oh, I
getting.
thought you said that.
We don't know if anything's broken. We're fixing. We're solving a problem that may not be a problem. Is what I think I'm hearing from Sam.
And I think, and maybe I'm misspeaking, but Dr. Berry's not here. I don't think anyone did get detention.
Oh, I thought you
at
said
all.
it happened.
I don't think anyone got detention.
I think that's information we can ask for, right? I think.
Or confiscation of the phone.
So Rachel, you would object to the committee taking this up in September and trying to wrap it up by October?
How are we going to pass the code of conduct beforehand?
Just as it is, I guess.
I mean, I'm not going to vote for it as is.
Okay, that's what I'm asking you. So
if this policy is not revised, I'm not voting for the code of conduct. I think it's irresponsible.
That's fair. So what if we added the word what if we just added this simple sentence, what, so what are you looking for, I guess? What is
Could
your?
we just not get a sense of the full board?
We can, but I'd like to have everybody in support of it. But sure, we can get a sense of the full board. Jessica,
What am I getting at?
I don't know, you asked for a sense of the board.
I mean, we went to, so the first sentence was, do we define emergency? The next question would be, what is that definition? So is there a sense of the board to allow the definition of the actual term, risk to life, property? What's the third one I keep forgetting?
Environment.
I'll read what you had proposed, which is, for the
Person,
purpose of this
property, or
policy, an emergency is defined as student as a sudden unexpected situation that poses an immediate risk to person, property, or the environment and requires urgent action to avoid harmful outcomes.
Just leave it as that.
Yeah.
Are we?
And Rachel, I think that could still be interpreted in the way you're looking for it to be, honestly, in my opinion. Because you can say risk to person.
Just to be clear, though, we are going beyond anything that has come out from New York State as guidance or as law. There's nothing that defines emergency that way or suggests the exception has to be that narrow. New York State has really left this piece to us. And I personally don't think we should define it that narrowly. I would be comfortable leaving it amorphous and trusting our administration to, like, be true to the spirit of what an emergency means.
So should we say though that that's to the discretion of the building? Because what I would just want to prevent is that every time a kid gets caught with a personal device, that the parents say it was an emergency, because that that will happen. So that's my only concern is, like, I totally am on board with what you're saying, Rachel, about when those real events happen, but I can just imagine that you'll have like literally 40 emergencies a week, and that we can't have.
So just to clarify,
Yeah.
I mean, I actually have more, this is my preference because I think it's cleaner to not define it, but I am flexible and open to a definition if the board feels a definition is necessary. I just would want that definition to encompass medical issues that are not call 911 level medical issues, right? Emergencies that are personal emergencies for the students, because to me, the purpose of that exception was, and I'm guessing, right, because New York State, this piece New York State hasn't given us a lot on, and what they've given us is conflicting. So I would want it to be broader for the moments where we have an administrator who's like, you know what, the student genuinely felt this was an emergency. It's fine. I'm letting it go. I don't feel that I have to, that I'm stuck with enforcing this because this is an absolute ban. But I see what you're saying, right? Like, we certainly can't allow a rule to take place where it's like a parent can write a note and be like, well, that phone call was an emergency, right? And that's what you're saying. I acknowledge that. So I'm not saying that I have to have it be only that sentence, but I feel very strongly that there should be an exception in there for the benefit of the students and for our administration and teachers and how they can handle it. But I'm open to more definition. Yeah, microphone.
What if we kick this back to Dr. Posse to work with Dr. Bear and I guess Ms. Javelin over what we could come up with that suits all of these requirements, and have this for the next meeting and circulate it as well? Because I think that's the only way that that's going to satisfy everybody. But I hear like a very clear sense of the board that we want it defined, but we want it really to be, we want it to say emergency, but we want it really for emergencies. Is that?
And there may be times when it's not appropriate for all of the students to have these phones in an emergency if they need to pay attention to what adults are telling them, which is why the second part of the paragraph talks about the discretion, where if there is a major emergency, it's a more like a communal emergency where a school is under threat for whatever reason, that adult supervision may be paramount. So I was actually going to ask Dr. Posse if he wanted to weigh in on that, whether here or in a draft, because we also don't want a free-for-all.
I think that's fine, but I do just want to say that the definition that is posed here in Alternative 2, as I read it, does not exclude
the type of emergencies that Ms. Gilliar is potentially referencing,
I agree.
right? I think it is broad and comprehensive, and a student who, perhaps it's not a call the fire department emergency, right? But in their mind, they can justify and make the case for how it falls under these sort of parameters. I don't think it is exclusive. I believe it's broad and open to enough interpretation that it would satisfy the need that Ms. Gilliard is expressing.
I would be very happy with that first sentence of alternative two. No, you don't, because you don't.
It's that first sentence. We don't need the rest.
You don't want to
of it.
get rid of all, because I think that getting into like which types of emergencies and distracting is not.
Literally just the first sentence of what's phrased as
I
alternative
like that.
two.
I'd be good with that as well.
Okay.
And just to be clear, the way I read that, the rest of that paragraph, I feel like gets discussed slightly in the first paragraph of the entire policy.
Yeah.
So I'm not even sure why we're rewriting it there.
Yeah.
Unless I'm reading it wrong.
I think the quagmire here that we were stuck in, and the reason we had so many back and forths on emergency, is because New York State gave us these two very conflicting ideas that are valid, right? Which is, there are moments where a cell phone as an exception, like should be given an exception in an emergency. And there are also emergencies where having, 100 students in a spot on their cell phones could really jeopardize the adult's ability to handle the situation as well.
So if we're okay with this whole policy as it is, and we just want to take alternative to that first sentence, why don't we just approve it right now, move forward with the code of conduct as planned, and then we can always, the policy committee can always adjust it over the, like, we don't have to let perfect be the enemy of good on these policies all the time. Like, we should be approving policies, and then they're living, breathing documents that we can always change. Ms. Alvarez.
Just to clarify, underneath alternative two, the proposal is lumped in with more, where it says when not permitted, when permitted. That is not being added, right?
We're striking everything except the first sentence.
Okay, so that's what we are. So just that one sentence.
Unless Dr. Posse thinks that some other language should be included.
So we're stopping at the first sentence, is that what?
Yes, I'm okay with the first sentence, and I can get feedback from Dr. Bear and Ms. Javelin before our next meeting.
But I'm actually gonna propose to see if we can take a, would you be opposed to if we just took a vote on this policy as is with that sentence and just got this off our plate? I think that would be, I think we probably can pass that now. There's not really.
There is other stuff in this policy, though, that was changed, so we need to address that before we,
But they're all, I don't think anyone has a problem with it.
with the specific educational purpose exception.
Do you?
I think some other people have more comments on the other piece, but we can talk.
But let's talk about it now.
I think we can talk about it.
I would
and get
love
it
to have
done.
this policy behind us after tonight, and I don't see any reason why we can't. Because it's just gonna take more time at the next meeting also. So let's close emergencies on that first sentence, and then let's talk about the specific, and then I think all the testing stuff is communication stuff is okay, and the only thing that might be controversial is this second page. In the case of use for a specific educational purpose, a teacher or advisor may inform the building principal of a specific educational purpose that requires an exception, or the superintendent or their designee may deem a specific educational purpose appropriate for an exception. In these instances, there is no need for individual parents, guardians, or students to apply for an exception. When an exception has been deemed appropriate based on the requirements of a particular course or extracurricular, the exception will remain in place until the specific educational purpose is deemed no longer applicable. In the alternative, request for an exception for a specific educational purpose may be made to the building principal. So it's basically saying that either an appropriate staff member may just deem it required, or a parent can request it, at which time it would have to be approved. How do we feel about
And
this?
so the purpose of this was, the goal is to avoid impeding the learning process, right? So even having to wait 2 weeks for the IT department, so it was floated at the last meeting, 2 weeks for the IT department to pull down, whatever the IT department does to enable students to access whatever they need to access. 2 weeks is a long time. I mean, a student can have, 3 quizzes within the span of 2 weeks, if not more. And there's a lot of learning time that can be lost in those 2 weeks. And so one of the reasons for putting this in, and there is no time frame in this policy. So the request could be made, but there's nothing that says how long it can take for the administration to honor the request or deny the request. And so I would ask maybe Dr. Posse and Dr. Feeney, whoever maybe add some language in there so that a student or even a teacher is not waiting 2 months, even a month.
Well, the way I read this is that the teacher or advisor is informing the building principal of the specific educational purpose that requires the exception.
Yes, but it also says a parent or a student can make the request. And in that situation, there's an approval process, approval or denial process. So the goal is to make sure students have the tools they need in their respective classes and that learning not be impeded.
I mean, I think that what if we approve this the way it is without a time limit, and we, again, to avoid perfect being the enemy of good, we get it approved so it's understood that the expectation of the board in this policy is that student needs will be addressed, and if we see that it's not being done promptly, it's easy to change. Like that, if we get into a cadence of changing policies on a short-term basis as needed, I think we can be much more effective in governing through policy.
I think it's
Meaning we can approve this and we can change it again in October.
Yes, I still think we need to have Dr. Posse's input, but
So just a clarifying question. The current policy leaves the approval with the building principal. This policy moves the approval, or this proposal moves the approval to the teacher. Am I reading that correctly or no?
That was my same question. I can answer
Well,
that.
it says the superintendent or their designee, including but not limited to the building principal. So it's saying that you're the final arbiter.
Well, I do agree with what you said, Mr. Smith, where you said a teacher advisor may inform the building principal. And it doesn't say anything about whether the building principal can say yay or nay.
It doesn't contemplate an approval. It just says that like they're being
Just as
informed.
they're telling them.
So I think, first of all, that language here we should talk about. What New York State allows, right, is they explicitly say that that a school district can adopt a policy with an exception, and the language is if authorized by a teacher, principal, or the school district. Also charter school, board of cooperative educational services, but those are not us, right? So it allows us to have the exception be if authorized by a teacher, principal, or school district. And I think that language is important. So I actually would go back to the previous language and I would have it be, I think what was before was superintendent, building principal, or district, because I think the deeming can happen at any of those levels. What this contemplates is that a parent or guardian or a student can request an exception by approaching the building principal, which from a chain of command standpoint, I think is the right way to do it, right? People should be going to their building. But also in advance, why have a system where we make parents or students request an exception when the teacher, the district, or the principal already knows that certain classes need exceptions? The idea is to sort of cut out extraneous administrative nonsense, right? We already know sports broadcasting needs X. We already know AP biology needs cameras. We already know these things. Just deem it an appropriate educational purpose for the things where it's appropriate. So in a way, I think this draft is intended to allow both. This is what New York State allows. It allows it to be the teacher, the principal, or the district just making the decision about it. And I think that therefore we should allow that as well, because the teachers know what's going on in their classroom. If the whatever teacher says my students need this, that should be good enough. And I think we need to have records of it, but I don't think we need to have a 9-layer administrative process that takes months, because the goal is to get the distractions out of the classroom, but it's not to get in the way of appropriate instructional use.
Okay, so what are you proposing as a next step? Because the question is, can we make some tweaks to this right now and try to?
Yes, so the first sentence, because Ms. Villar read directly from the statute, which I'm looking at here, says if necessary for a specific educational purpose or purposes as authorized by a teacher, principal, or school district. And then much of the last paragraph on that page, the pages aren't numbered, so it would be the second page of the draft. Much of that big paragraph toward the end is superfluous.
Yeah.
And can be teased out.
I'm sorry, I lost which paragraph you're in.
In the case of the use.
It's on the second page of the draft.
Okay.
And it begins in the case of, we don't need a teacher advisor may inform the building principal. Because it's already in the statute that the teacher can make the determination.
Right.
And if we agree.
So which part are you taking out?
So if you take this paragraph, indicate, do you want to just read what you would propose it would say, Deborah?
Yeah.
Well, I was just reading from the statute. So it was really just the first bullet on the page. It's necessary for a specific educational purpose or purposes as authorized by a teacher, principal, or school district. And then that in the case of use, there's so much of that paragraph it's not necessary. It's redundant, completely redundant.
Just one thing to just be aware of is that the potential unintended consequence of broadening the language, as is being suggested, is that it may be applied inconsistently. In other words, if we are removing it from the principal and saying that each individual teacher can make the determination, there's just a risk there that we should be aware of. The other piece that we should just be aware of is that on non-school issued devices, GoGuardian is not, our filtering is not working, does not work on non-school issued devices. That's the reason that we had begun with a tighter interpretation and saying that we were that the building principal was making exceptions. So if we move away from that, we should just do it eyes wide open, understanding that those are unintended consequences that we may face.
So with that comment in mind, I actually was nodding along with Deborah for her bullet point. The only additional thing that the paragraph version offers is that at least the teacher has to inform the building principal, which means I don't think we have to stick with the paragraph version of it, but I think tracking it is an important piece of it, right? Not having it be that at the building level and at the district level, we have no idea who is authorized what. I do think it's important that it still be that this kind of authorization is the exception and really does have an educational purpose. And I think what Dr. Posse is getting at is that if we don't know what's going on, right, that may not be the case.
So then we want to say that the teacher then must inform the building principal, which now doesn't make it superfluous. It's a procedural step.
So it does sound like we need a little bit of feedback on this. Do we think we have enough information that you can tease this? We know what we're doing on emergency, and it's just a question of tightening this one paragraph, and we can get it back on the next, for approval at the next meeting.
Yeah, I feel confident about
Ms.
that.
Maloney's eyes are glazing over. She wants to go home.
No, she's
I'm awake. But I agree with that. I don't think that wordsmithing here is the most productive use of the whole board's time, and I think we can certainly wordsmith this on our own and come back with something.
So let's plan on that. So we'll have it back at the next meeting, hopefully with all of these comments incorporated. So it sounds like we're all kind of on the same page.
That's good.
Okay.
Policy loves to work in the summer.
Yes. Don't we all? Okay.
So just to clarify then, August, we would approve this, and then we would have our hearing on the code of conduct, right? We have all of it on for the same day. I think we can do both at once, but that's still what
I'm hoping we actually don't have to discuss it, and we can potentially include it in the code of conduct because I think we actually resolved everything here. It's just an issue of tightening some words.
No, I think that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same
Resolve this
page. I totally agree.
And I would ask that everybody here look at the draft
For sure.
before we get to August 6th, because we've had this very extensive public conversation. So when we get to August
We're just
6th,
approving it.
there aren't any surprises.
I think I asked this pertaining to something else, but legally, it was allowed to have one posted CCCCC for that meeting and still make an edit the day afterward.
Sure.
So it doesn't actually matter if whatever we approve right before the hearing is different than what's posted. Okay.
Okay, great. So let's move on to old business. We did have a community comment question, which is there an opportunity to reevaluate use of YouTube totally? Why are we using it if it can be misused so easily? And I think Dr. Fee, you did also have some follow-up with that community member who asked that, I think, right? About like YouTube and YouTube Kids. Is this something you feel that you can answer, or do you feel you did answer it when you spoke to the community member? It's up to you. If it's something, if you want to go and give like a brief answer now, we can. If not, we can also defer it to the next meeting. Because I know we haven't spoken since the last meeting. But the question was specific. Or do you want to just speak? I think it's very hard to answer the question the way it was worded. But I think if you want to just give like a quick blurb on use of YouTube as a follow-up specifically to the last presentation, if not, and whether or not it's something that is being evaluated or not.
So, regarding YouTube, the community member clarified after the board meeting last month that the community member verified after the board meeting last month that although YouTube.com was indeed blocked, YouTube Kids was not blocked. And that seemed to be how kids were able to access YouTube. Once I received that clarification from her, within 24 hours, YouTube Kids was shut down on district devices.
The community member also, I think she also spoke to me in the hallway after the meeting, and I think she had made a similar comment as the speaker tonight, that there may be a loophole with YouTube embedded content when it's on another site. Is that something we can ask Mr. Maloney to look at?
We can certainly look to clarify that. We certainly want teachers to be able to post YouTube appropriate sites to their classrooms, but we don't want that to be a gateway for kids to then have access to YouTube.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. I don't believe anybody had any new business that they informed me of, so I'm going to assume there's no new business, and we will move to our final opportunity for the community to be heard. I didn't check the list, but if anybody wishes to speak, same procedures as before. Yep.
I just wanted to mention all of our draft resolutions have been submitted to the New York State School Board Association, so we're good to go for whatever happens in October.
Thank you for all that work.
Yeah,
That was a lot of work.
thank everybody who participated.
Preston, go ahead.
Hi, Shannon Preston again. I just wanted to thank you. I have been coming to these meetings over the last few years. I was part of the SUSE parent group who advocated for smaller class size, and it's just like a beautiful experience to be heard and to see change happen, and I know that we're all working towards the same thing, so I just appreciate your service and your dedication to our students.
Thank you. Are there any additional speakers? No. Okay. So we are thankfully not going back to executive session. Our next meeting is on August 6th, and followed by another meeting on August 20th. I believe August 6th is an evening meeting, and August 20th will most likely be a brief daytime, just consent agenda meeting. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting. Is there a second? Ms. Malani, all in favor? 6-0. The meeting is adjourned. We will see you on August 6th. We are back at, I'm not positive on that, but it is posted on, it will be posted on the district calendar.